If you might spare me a moment, Stitch, I would appreciate it.
Right away, Mr. Holmes. I'm just finishing up with Mrs. Rowbottom.
I'll tell you when we're finished, Mr. Rumsey. I'm paying good money and I expect no less than your undivided attention.
What is that racket, Watson?
The treadles of sewing machines, I imagine.
I mean the voices.
Can you not appreciate the dulcet tones of the Orient, Holmes?
My pedestrian mind cannot appreciate what it cannot understand. I'll grow grey before Mrs. Rowbottom is satisfied.
Claim pressing business, national emergency and so on.
Worthless. I know her type. Obstinate as a mule.
A pointed threat might remove her recalcitrance.
Watson, you surprise me. Besides, have you not remarked the size of her handbag? Who knows what she has in there? I beg your pardon, madam. Might I have a brief word with Mr. Rumsey?
No, Mr. Rumsey is not free.
I've decided on a strategy to shift La Rowbottom.
A subterfuge, then. But not too subtle, I hope. It would be lost on her.
She appears to be a woman whose sense of propriety may be vulnerable to judicious tweaking. Follow my lead.
Try not to be too offensive. She's Rumsey's customer, after all.
The fabric of your frock has become a favourite of the demi-monde.
You've seen it elsewhere?
Indeed. Watson, did we not recently see this particular material at the Chelsea Burlesque?
That young woman whom Bingo Oakshott insists on calling his protégée was draped in it. A dress, wasn't it? What there was of it.
You disremember her dress, but she had it on so briefly. No, it was the drawing-room curtains which she wore as a shawl.
Or was it a towel from the loo? Good day to you, madam.
I'm sorry, Stitch. I had to get rid of her.
Oh, I can live without her custom, Mr. Holmes. Much more trouble than it's worth. If you're looking for a job as a floor walker, I'll hire you.
Has the move to Jermyn Street been advantageous, Stitch?
A bit more money, but I don't laugh so much as I did in Piccadilly.
A more serious sort of clientele comes round here?
They take themselves more seriously anyways. They dress better, more brass, but they're much the same.
I'm not surprised that a man of your experience is undeceived by appearances. This needle seems to have outlived its usefulness. Might I take it?
You're welcome to it. It served me well. May it serve you, though I can't imagine how.
What can you tell me about this hat stitch? Anything of interest?
At the risk of dabbling in your line, I'd say the wearer has a oblong head, obviously big, younger man from the blocking. The style and quality bespeak concern, but not obsession with appearance. Colour probably doesn't signify.
And the shop?
De Groot's a competent tailor, imports all his materials from Amsterdam. He serves a comfortable clientele in South Africa.
What can your practised eye tell me about this button stitch?
I'm sure you know its tortoise shell has a continental finish, Dutch maybe. The thread is nothing special, sewn to a coat I'd say, not off the peg, custom made, but not too dear.
Available locally?
Not here. I've got the largest inventory in England. Help yourself, you need one.
All aboard! Train to Eastham, Cambridge, Newmarket and Norwich. Fleming's been porter at Magdalen since King Charles lost his head. Marvellous character. Remembers everything. And he's eager to tell it all for a pint or two.
Was Magdalen your college then?
No, my chemistry tutor was a fellow there. I visited his rooms one term.
I've never been clear on your university days. Where did you study when you came up?
I need to rest, Watson. Wake me when we arrive, will you?
Sleeping? That's fine. Wonderful. What about our other inquiries? Any ideas? Do you think Mycroft is still in danger? Are we? Well, I suppose nothing much can happen on a train.
Fleming? Fleming, old fellow, how are you? College closed. Fleming, I say rouse yourself, sir. This won't do, Watson. He requires some hair from the dog that bit him.
It must have been a huge dog. Shall I check his pulse?
No need. Collect a couple of bottles of strong ale from the public house we passed, will you? Mind it's not small beer.
Some porter for the porter. Sorry, Holmes.
Would you oblige us, Fleming, with your opinion? We're evaluating this ale.
Happy to assist young gentlemen in the pursuit of knowledge. So for science, as you might say. Excellent. I recognise you, don't I?
I'm pleased to think you might. I'm Sherlock Holmes.
Of course you are. Never forget a face, Mr. Holmes. Just takes me a bit longer to focus. You're keeping well? Haven't gained a stone since you went down. I read your exploits and beatings. And this is Dr. Watson, is it? Pleased, I'm sure.
Even after all these years, my recollections of this place are so vivid. Is that unusual, Fleming?
Not at all, sir. We are what we remember. As the bard says, even purpose is but a slave to memory.
I need to excavate your prodigious memory, Fleming. May I do that?
I enjoy a good mystery. Dig away, sir.
I saw a tattoo on a corpse. Something about it reminded me of Cambridge.
A view of Trumpington Street.
Nothing so definitive. It's a neatly rendered blooming rose. You're familiar with such a figure?
If it was engraved on the subject's backside, it might be the badge of the Tudor Rose.
The Arcane Social Club? Of course. The symbol of England was their sign. I had no idea those rare birds marked themselves.
Since your time, sir. Been a drinking club for more than a decade, carousing and such. Nothing much secret about it. Old boys are ashamed to be associated with the newer members. University may revoke their charter, is what I heard.
Is the artist the local man?
Jack Canvas in Cheapside designed the tattoo version from an old print drawing. I'm told he recently passed over.
Yes, I should have recognized his hand. But my brain was fixed on the subject matter. The delicate petals set along the brambles and the thorns. Unexpectedly lovely. I've seen the painting, of course.
As a symbol, the old boys was thinking they were England's best.
Some of them proved it. But their successors took to advertising. Trying to convince themselves, perhaps.
True quality never commends itself, Mr. Holmes.
The Tudor Rose drew its members from the whole university, didn't it?
Indeed. Over the years, there's been hundreds of initiates.
Do you remember all the Magdalen men?
Their names run together now, but I do recognize most of them.
Regrettably, I don't have a name or a face. What are these photographs, Fleming?
Young gentlemen of Magdalen, Mr. Holmes. I keep the most recent classes on display. Their families seem to enjoy it.
I have reason to believe my corpse was a Magdalen man and a member of the Tudor Rose.
If he came here after 1860, I may have him in my albums.
Could we look through your portraits of the previous classes?
But that's thousands of young gentlemen, Mr. Holmes. 100 or more would have joined the Tudor rows.
Would the date of a student's matriculation narrow the field sufficiently?
It might. My memory's good, but not flawless. And some of these characters were more memorable than others.
I believe this boy turned 19 in June of 1874 and came to college for the Michaelmas term that year.
Let me check my photographs. Ah, yes, 1874. A rum class. Bright, no question. But rum.
Anybody there who later joined the Tudor rows?
Let's see. There's Dundalk, the Earl's youngest boy. Died in the Transvaal, I heard. And Lawton is a lord since his pater passed on. An MP, I believe. Oh, yes, his special friend was Pratt. An orphan came to us from India. Strange boy. Don't know what became of him. And Cunard is making his fortune in Australia. That's all, I think.
Thank you, Fleming. Very helpful.
A pleasure, sir. Always a pleasure to see one of my young gentlemen.
Nothing changes very much in Cambridge, Watson.
I'm sure the pace of change is slow, but the aura of immutability is perpetrated by porters and dons. They are eternal. Everyone else is transient. They have an interest in perpetuating the illusion, and your frozen memory assists them.
It was merely an observation, Watson. Excuse me. Pratt and Lawton together. This is too terrible to be a coincidence, Watson. Our corpse is the ex-Thomas Pratt. I'm certain of it.
If you say so, Holmes. I'm a bit baffled.
Cambridge can reveal no more about the present case. We can just make the next train to London. I wish to see Pratt's effects, and then we'll carry the bad news to Lord Lawton. We've just time to catch the next train to London.
Excellent. Let's be off.
I'm afraid I carry some deplorable news. Mr. Pratt has been murdered.
How extremely vexing. I wonder if he remembered me in his will. He's 6 months behind in the rent.
You'll have to absorb that cost. He's paid a higher price.
This is very inconvenient. Mr. Mason always said I was too kind for this world.
I'm sure he was a flawless judge of character. Might we look at Mr. Pratt's effects? It can make no difference to the deceased.
As you're not the police, I think not. Even the defunct have some right to privacy. There may be personal items about.
Of a marketable nature, perhaps? Are you familiar with any of Mr. Pratt's haunts, clubs, saloon bars, salons, and such?
No. His leisure activities are a mystery to me. There was his painting, of course.
The flat lacks its own bathtub. Where did he perform his weekly ablutions?
He had rights to one in the basement, but he preferred Neville's in Charing Cross. No doubt a reprobate's delight. All manner of dissipation and depravity are likely to be served with soap and water.
I'm unfamiliar with that particular pleasure palace. Could you identify Pratt for the police if requested?
I should think so. He lived here for more than 3 years. I know his face as my own.
But could you recognize him without reference to his face?
No. But why would I be asked to do that?
Do you know anything about Pratt's years at Cambridge?
Nothing. But he was a university man, that's for certain. I only let rooms to that sort of person.
Did Mr. Pratt have any special friends?
Only Mr. Spacemaker. but I haven't seen him in more than a month.
Spacemaker?
Yes, unusual name, isn't it? Peculiar young man. As pretty as any girl.
Do you have a likeness of Mr. Pratt in your flat that we might borrow?
We did not have that kind of relationship, Mr. Holmes.
What kind is that?
You know very well what kind. The kind that exchanges personal photographs. We were not intimate friends. No one could prove that charge.
I perceive you have a question, Watson.
Shouldn't we find out more about this fellow Spacemaker, where he lives and so on? He might be able to help.
Doubtful, Doctor. The name is certainly an alias. The bearer possesses a basic German vocabulary and a rudimentary sense of humour. Watson, we need to peruse the flat. Can you occupy Mrs. Mason?
Would you suggest a sharp rap on the head?
Use your imagination and your knowledge of the distaff nature.
This woman confounds my paltry knowledge, Holmes, but appeals to her vanity might not fall on deaf ears.
Anything of material interest here, Doctor? Using my methods, please.
There's a dearth of personal items of any kind. Address book, writing materials, letters, photos, that sort of thing.
Well observed. You've noted what's missing, though one would expect to find more of that sort of thing in the bedroom. Still, this chamber deserves our closest attention. I'm sure he thought highly of you and confided in you. Perhaps you have the names of his friends or relations in your flat?
I do not. He was orphaned by the Sepoy Rebellion, and the uncle who raised him has been dead for years. He had no family that I know about. Would the ministry consider paying his back rent, do you think?
Perhaps you would like to freshen up and change your handsome frock.
Oh, why would I ever want to do that?
I'm sure that a chief inspector from the CID will be by directly for a chat. They always interview the most important parties in a murder investigation. You'll need to accompany him to Scotland Yard. There'll be numerous photographers and journalists about. I thought you might like to prepare yourself for the ordeal.
Oh, well, I see. Very thoughtful of you, Mr. Holmes. Oh, being in the public eye is such a trial. Excuse me, gentlemen. Close the door when you leave.
I suspect we'll see no more of her.
Capital, Holmes, capital. The appeal to her vanity was irresistible. It overwhelmed her suspicion that we would make off with Pratt's valuables.
I believe she knows the worth of every item in this flat to the last farthing, and it isn't much. Her exit, like everything she does, is calculated. But let us take advantage of her narcissism. You know my practice, Watson. I'm looking for anything unexpected. Useful items, hat pins.
I'm sure. This certainly falls under the heading of unexpected.